James Gunn, the people over at Warner Brothers, as well as friendly entertainment media outlets, have been reporting that James Gunn Superman is a huge success for the studio following its release a couple weeks ago. Well, now it's looking like James Gunn is kind of making excuses for why the movie is underperforming at the international box office, which is something that you wouldn't expect for a movie that truly was a success. Before I dive into this, though, make sure you click that subscribe button if you're new to the channel and you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And if you can, click the like button and also leave a comment because the engagement really helps out with the channel. So I have this article pulled up from that Park Place with the headline, James Gunn denies Superman is woke, points to anti-American sentiment as reasons for overseas box office struggles. Now, this was kind of going around before the movie was released that Superman was going to be woke, and a lot of that stems from comments that James Gunn himself had said. Now, I even made a video about it talking before the movie came out that a lot of what James Gunn was saying was kind of being misconstrued and blown out of proportion, and I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but I also said that he shouldn't give any impression that the movie is going to be going down that direction because a lot of audiences are already weary about movies coming out of Hollywood these days, and you don't want to give them any reason to doubt it. And then after the opening weekend, a lot of those rumors were kind of squashed right away. Even people who didn't like the movie still admitted that the movie wasn't woke. They just didn't think it was that good. And okay, fine, they're allowed to have their opinion. So I don't think that whole people are just not watching the movie because they think it was woke don't really hold much water when it comes to this sort of thing. Not to mention the word of mouth and review sites like Rotten Tomatoes are generally positive for the movie. So there are other factors in play as to why this movie has been underperforming globally. And we want to get into that and discuss whether or not the movie actually stands a chance of turning profit for the studio. Superman hit theaters on July 11, 2025, marking the official kickoff of Gunn and Peter Safran's revamped DC studio slate. With a reported production budget of around $225 million, excluding marketing, the film opened to a robust $125 million in North America, securing the seventh largest DC opening weekend ever unadjusted for inflation. Now, I think the $225 million that they're claiming is underreporting what the actual production budget was, but let's just assume that that's the case and try to factor in what the marketing cost for this movie probably is going to be. The Hollywood Reporter said it's probably going to be in the ballpark area of $150 million that they're spending for the marketing. That means the final cost for this movie is around $375 million. So when you take all that into consideration, that means this is a movie that probably needs to make at least $750 million at the global box office, probably closer to $800 million at the global box office in order to be profitable. Now, James Gunn said before the movie came out that it doesn't need to make $700 million in order to be a success for the studio. He never really defined what it means to be a success. I'm talking strictly on whether or not the movie's going to be profitable, because if it doesn't make that $750 million, then the movie isn't going to be profitable, and I would say it's a box office failure. That's not to say that the movie would never reach profitability at all. It just won't make it at the box office. By its second weekend, it added an estimated $57 million domestically, bringing its North America cumulative to $235 million after just 10 days. Analysts projected it could reach $300 to $350 million in the US and Canada alone, buoyed by strong word of mouth and an A- cinema score and an 88% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So it sounds like that's decent enough. I mean, a $300 to $350 million box office total for a superhero movie would actually be pretty solid and enough for it to actually be profitable, assuming that it's pretty strongly performing overseas, which it looks like that's not the case when it comes to this movie. Globally, the picture is less super. Superman has grossed $171 million internationally so far, for a worldwide total of $406 million. Its second weekend international haul was an estimated $45 million, excluding China, where performance has been particularly weak. I mean, that's not really that huge of an issue, though, because the studio doesn't get much money from the Chinese market anyway. Basically, it just has to go crazy in China for the studio to actually get any meaningful amount of money from, I believe it's around 20 to 30% is what American studios get from the Chinese box office. Projections suggest the final international tally of $200 to $250 million, potentially pushing the global total to $500 to $600 million, enough to crown it the top superhero film of 2025 so far. Not a huge bar to clear. but short of blockbusters like The Batman, which grossed $772 million in 2022. And you know what else a $600 million global box office would be shy of? That's Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. That made around just under $668 million globally during its theatrical run. That's not adjusted for inflation, mind you, and that's back in 2013. I didn't do the calculations on this. I believe adjusted for inflation, that'd probably be closer to the $900 million range. So that's not very good for James Gunn Superman when it underperforms compared to Man of Steel. And it's also surprising considering word of mouth for James Gunn Superman is significantly more positive than what we saw with Man of Steel. But something else to note here too, and something I made a video on previously, opening weekend for Man of Steel was $116 million. Now the article says that James Gunn Superman made, where is that at? $125 million in North America during its opening weekend. But that's also taken into consideration the early previews as well. And I believe that started on Tuesday. And then you have Wednesday, Thursday. Then it's the regular Friday through Sunday weekend. During that Friday through Sunday weekend, a typical 3-day weekend, it made around $90 million. So that's less than what we saw with the 3-day opening weekend for Man of Steel. So it's looking like Man of Steel is going to beat out James Gunn Superman. And this isn't me arguing that that's a better movie. It was just more profitable for the studio at the time. Now, obviously, superhero movies have kind of been on a downturn in recent years. So this shouldn't necessarily be the most unexpected thing, but still, I mean, people are going to try to argue that this is the better movie and all this other stuff. And yeah, maybe that's the case. But as far as profitability goes, it's falling behind Man of Steel. We're definitely performing better domestically than we are internationally, he admitted. Superman is not a known commodity in some places. Yeah, that's kind of a weak excuse. Superman is one of the most well-known superheroes of all time. So if James Gunn is saying Superman's not performing overseas because he's not a well-known character, you also have to consider, why did Man of Steel make more money overseas than it made domestically? And it also affects things that we have a certain amount of anti-American sentiment around the world right now. It isn't really helping us. Now, I think this is a pretty bad excuse, and some people have tried to take this to mean James Gunn's pointing out Trump being in office right now as to the reason why there's anti-American sentiment and other things like that. And if that's the case, then you would have expected the same anti-American sentiment to surround Captain America, Brave New World that came out a couple months ago. I mean, Trump was in office then. A lot of the sentiment for America now is the same sentiment that we had back then. Yet that movie made more money overseas than it did domestically. I mean, it's not enough for it to be profitable. That was still a box office failure for the studio, but still, it made $213 million overseas compared to $200 million domestically. So if James Gunn is going to try to argue that it's because anti-Americanism is why people don't want to watch Superman, which is an iconically American character, well, that really just doesn't hold water either. But there is a reason as to why Superman isn't performing well overseas compared to what we're seeing domestically. And I think a lot of that just has to deal with the fact that it's peak James Gunn. A lot of the people who watched the movie, whether they loved it or hated it, basically said it has a ton of James Gunn's style and humor in that movie. And while people who like James Gunn's style might enjoy it, I mean, that's pretty much the sentiment surrounding it. If you like James Gunn's style, you'll like the movie. If you don't like his style and you don't like his humor, you're not going to like the movie. But the problem with James Gunn's style, though, is that it really doesn't translate as well to overseas audiences. Now, he has been able to find some success overseas with his style, such as with the Guardians of the Galaxy films. Those performed better overseas than they were domestically, but those were also Marvel films. And at the time, Marvel films pretty much always did well overseas. So you really have to treat it as a separate case. When it comes to this one, though, this is a new entity being released globally. And it really does seem like international audiences just aren't feeling it. And I mean, that's fine. I mean, if it's not made for them, but that's one of the things you need to take into consideration when you're making something for a global market. You have to make something that resonates with the global market. And it just feels like this is one of those movies that doesn't do it. And it might ultimately hurt its chance of reaching profitability at the box office. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Disagree? What reason do you think that could be for this movie not to perform overseas compared to domestically? And also, if you haven't already, Make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click the like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.